Welcome back to What is Going On with Stand with Meg. I'm your host, SJ, and sister to Stand with Meg, and today we're going to talk broad strokes, timeline, outline. I'm going to do my best to not get into the details and instead unpack those later in a separate series because if you'll take notice, we start in 2006 and we get up to 2026. So it's 20 years. So I would be here forever if I tried to go into detail as I went. As a reminder, yes, I'm her sister. I'm not unpacking this just because I'm nasty and vengeful. I am nasty, but I'm not vengeful. She came on to TikTok in 2024 claiming that her children were stolen, her ex is an abuser, the stepmom is a kidnapper, all kinds of crazy things against all kinds of people. And I entered the scene 6 months later to kind of set the record straight because she wasn't listening to court orders. So if you're like, sister on sister crime, she started it. Let's get into it. They met late 06, like the fall, were married in 07. And over the course between 08 and 2013, they would go on to have 5 children. The last two were a 2-for-1 special. They filed, divorce started in 2013 when she filed, and they did not legally get divorced until 2016. So if you look at the span of the past 20 years, only this much were they together, and then this much were they married. So in 2016, divorce was 80-20. So Meghann had 80%, Craig had 20%. She was awarded $6,000 in combined child support and alimony. She doesn't talk about this. She talks about it like she was this like poor single mom, but the child support portion of that, which was $3,000, was untaxed, which is insane. She lied to me about this. So, in terms of where I sit on this, I was Team Meg up until here. Okay, so from here and before, I think Craig is a villain, terrible person. Okay, sorry, I had to take my sweater off. This is exhausting to like unpack. I keep doing false starts. Okay, so like I just said, up until here, I was not a fan of Craig. Lots of stories from Meghann. I never witnessed anything salacious from Craig. That doesn't mean that this divorce period of their life was not incredibly chaotic. It was. Their divorce was high right here. Was high conflict. They have always been high conflict, and for a long time, I assumed that was Craig. And in 2022, other things start happening with the children. So up until here, children are little. They can't say much. At this point, child number 1 gets old enough and things start changing. In 2022, things start moving to the point that child number 1 actually elects to no longer live with her mother and moves in with my sister, older sister Jamie. She's number 2. And my sister takes her in. At that point, my sister Jamie actually covered all of the expenses for this child. And in 2023, the GIL actually awards residential custody of child number 1 to my older sister, Jamie. So this idea that Meghann lost all 5 of her children in 2024 is actually not totally true. She already didn't have custody of one of them. She only had custody of 4 children at the time. One of them was with my sister. That child would go on to go through a lot, and I think I'll unpack that in a separate TikTok, maybe even with her. She's almost 18. This started when she was 13. Can you believe that? That's crazy. So when she turns 18, maybe I'll get her on here and she wants to, she'll talk about what happened here. But in 2024, when the GAL received reports from the children's therapist, now keep in mind that therapist was picked by Meghann. That was Meghan's therapist that she had selected. She'd been taking the kids to. She was fully bought into that therapist. That therapist called the GAL and called CPS and like hotlined kids are unsafe. The judge awarded temporary custody to the dad, Craig, and a 30-day temporary no contact order. And the stipulations for that no contact order was after those 30 days were up, Meghann could start seeing the kids with the reintegration therapist with the plan of supervised visits and then moving back into some kind of custody arrangement. But the judge very much was like, these kids need a break from her. We need to see what's going on, which was interesting. So the kids were removed in January. Sometime in 2024, child number 1, the one I mentioned previously, does end up with custody with their father, but for a period of time does enter foster care. Again, we'll talk about that with her because that's very much her story, but it's important to note. Meghann would have all kinds of things kind of happen. In April, child support ended for her of 2024. She does finally get to start seeing her kids in December after being very I want to say difficult to work with, and I'm trying to be more factual here. She essentially causes stalls by trying to find her own reintegration therapist, suggesting her own therapist, yelling at therapists. It essentially takes a while before they finally find a reintegration therapist that she can meet with. She starts seeing 3 kids, the 3 younger ones, in December. An April trial is canceled. This is because she failed to pay the GAL fees. And with that, the GAL she was also suing because in May of 2025, she starts suing everybody pro se. Now, if you're not super familiar with this, because I wasn't before all of this, pro se means you are representing yourself. You don't have an attorney. Meghann actually had an attorney through all of this up until This, I think February of 2024 is when her attorney dropped her. We still don't know the details of that, but she then started moving on pro se. Our mother was helping her pay for that attorney, and for whatever reason, that stopped. Meghann has been pro se ever since and has filed lawsuits against defamation case against me. She's filed a case against CPS, specifically the agents, the GAL, state of Missouri, state of Kansas. She's just suing a lot of people. Most of those have been dismissed. She spent a lot of time on that in 2025. And then in 2026, most of those have been dismissed. So we've covered a lot of ground. 06 to 26, a lot of time. Next, I think we're going to dial in a little bit more on what exactly happened between 24 and 26. We'll also later talk about the timeline when the most claims of abuse by Craig are claimed, which are through here, which is important. We'll talk through how likely I think abuse was. It's impossible to prove a negative, so I can't really say like Craig didn't abuse Meghann. I do think it's unlikely, and we'll talk through why I think that is. The other thing is my family started having issues with the way Meghann was parenting in 2022. This is when one of the recording of her providing HHG to her daughter happened in 2022. She did not lose custody of her children until 2024. So I mentioned HHC, that is synthetic THC. I caught the recording of that. Me and Meghann actually stopped talking in 2022, but we're still seen together. I can post pictures later if you want. Like, we still saw each other and were cordial at family events. And then through these years, by 2024, only very few family members are actually speaking with her. So let me know what specific questions you have, but this is the broad timeline of events. This didn't just happen overnight. She says that it just like zero idea that her kids were being taken. In fact, actually, whenever we were starting to dig deeper with Meghann in 2022, when I started to question if Craig was actually the villain, she actually had already had a CPS investigation against her. And that's part of the reason we were getting closer to her, as we were trying to help her, because we thought Craig was calling in false CPS reports. And the closer we got, the more we were like, oh, maybe these aren't false. So that's where a lot of that comes from. So she knew it was coming. So I'm exhausted. I bet you're exhausted. Have a great rest of your day.